ESPN won't tell you about the first overall draft pick who never made it to the majors because of a bar fight, or the Hall of Fame pitcher who died delivering aid to earthquake victims. These are just two of 11 stories that baseball's establishment has buried so deep you've probably never heard them. Today we're uncovering every MLB story too dark for mainstream sports media, from fatal overdoses covered up by team officials to career-ending injuries that could have been prevented. These tales reveal how America's pastime protects its image at any cost. J.R. Richard. J.R. Richard was the most feared pitcher in baseball during the late 1970s. The towering 6'8" right-hander threw his fastball at 100 miles per hour when most pitchers topped out at 90. His slider broke so sharply that batters often swung at pitches in the dirt. Richard struck out 303 batters in 1978, then followed that with 313 strikeouts in 1979 while posting a 2.71 ERA. In 1980, he was 10-4 with a 1.90 ERA and had been named the All-Star starter. These numbers put him on pace for the Hall of Fame before his 30th birthday. The Houston Astros had built their entire pitching staff around Richard's dominance. He was their ace, their ticket to playoff success, and their most valuable asset. Richard's intimidating presence on the mound made him nearly unhittable for opposing teams. Batters stepped into the box knowing they were facing someone who could overpower them with pure velocity or fool them with his devastating breaking ball. Early in the 1980 season, Richard started complaining about unusual symptoms that affected his pitching performance. He told team officials about persistent arm fatigue that didn't improve with rest. The dizziness he experienced on the mound was unlike anything he had felt before. Richard also reported feeling weak during games, symptoms that clearly indicated something serious was wrong with his health. The Astros' response to Richard's complaints revealed disturbing attitudes within the organization. Team officials dismissed his concerns as mental weakness rather than physical problems. Media members suggested Richard was making excuses for declining performance or trying to avoid pitching in important games. Some teammates questioned whether Richard was tough enough to play through normal aches and pains that all pitchers experience. Those signs were repeatedly downplayed despite Richard's status as the team's star performer. A Black Star athlete was being told that his pain wasn't real and that he needed to prove his toughness. Richard faced pressure to keep pitching despite symptoms that were clearly affecting his ability to perform at an elite level. He did not receive timely, thorough examination before his collapse. Richard continued pitching through these symptoms because he felt he had no choice. He needed to prove he wasn't weak or making excuses for poor performance. Every time he took the mound, he was fighting against his body's warning signs while trying to maintain his reputation as the game's most dominant pitcher. On July 30, 1980, Richard was warming up before a game when his body finally gave out completely. He collapsed during his pregame routine and suffered a massive stroke caused by a blood clot. Richard never pitched again. The Astros inducted him into their Hall of Fame in 2019, and he died in 2021 at age 71. Richard's case showed how dismissing player concerns could have devastating consequences. But sometimes the tragedy came from decisions that no organization could control. Brien Taylor. The New York Yankees handed Brien Taylor a $1.55 million signing bonus in 1991, making him the first overall pick in the MLB draft. Selected out of Williamsport High School, Taylor received what was then a record bonus for a high school player. He had everything scouts look for in a future ace pitcher. His fastball reached 100 miles per hour consistently, and his curveball dropped off the table like few pitchers could manage. Professional scouts called Taylor the best high school pitcher they had ever evaluated. His minor league performance backed up the hype completely. At Fort Lauderdale, he posted a 2.57 ERA with 187 strikeouts in 161 innings. In 1993, he went 13-7 with about 150 strikeouts in Double-A. The Yankees organization projected him as their ace of the future, someone who could anchor their rotation for the next decade. Taylor's combination of velocity and breaking ball movement was considered generational talent. December 18, 1993, started as a normal night out for Taylor and his brother during the offseason. Taylor was focused on his upcoming spring training and preparing for what many expected to be his major league debut season. The evening took a devastating turn when his brother got into a physical altercation with another patron at a bar in North Carolina. The fight escalated quickly as the two men wrestled on the floor. Taylor made a split-second decision that would destroy his entire career. Instead of staying out of the conflict, he jumped into the fight to help his brother. During the chaos, Taylor was thrown to the ground and his shoulder absorbed tremendous damage. The impact tore his labrum completely and damaged his shoulder capsule beyond repair. Dr. Frank Jobe, who examined Taylor after the injury, called it among the worst shoulder injuries he had ever seen. After extensive surgery and a full season of rehabilitation, Taylor attempted his comeback. The results were devastating for someone who had been considered a sure thing. His once dominant fastball had dropped roughly 8 miles per hour from 100 miles per hour. The velocity loss made his fastball much easier for professional hitters to catch up to. Even worse, Taylor could no longer command his curveball for strikes. The pitch that had made him special was effectively gone. He never reached the majors. The injury cost him the fastball and the curve that made him special. Taylor became one of only 3 first overall picks in MLB history who never made it to the major leagues. One moment of poor judgment eliminated years of development and millions of dollars in potential earnings. But Taylor's story was just bad luck and worse decisions. Sometimes the system itself failed players in ways that were far more sinister. Jose Fernandez. Jose Fernandez represented everything the Miami Marlins organization had hoped for when they drafted him in 2011. The young Cuban pitcher had escaped his homeland on his 4th attempt, making a dangerous journey across the ocean to reach America. His talent was obvious from his first professional appearances. Fernandez won National League Rookie of the Year in 2013 with a 2.19 ERA and 187 strikeouts in just 172 innings pitched. Tommy John surgery sidelined Fernandez for most of 2014 and part of 2015, but he returned stronger than ever. His 2016 season showed he had fully recovered from the elbow reconstruction surgery. Fernandez posted a 2.86 ERA with 253 strikeouts in 182 innings, proving he was back to being one of baseball's most dominant young pitchers. The Marlins built their future around his arm, knowing they had a generational talent who could anchor their rotation for years to come. September 25th, 2016 started as a normal day off for Fernandez during the final week of the regular season. He decided to take his 32-foot boat out for a late-night ride with 2 friends, Eduardo Rivero and Emilio Macias. The boat was traveling at approximately 65 miles per hour when it struck a jetty off Miami Beach. The impact was devastating and violent. All 3 men were killed instantly when the vessel crashed into the rocky outcropping. The Coast Guard found the overturned boat hours later. The autopsy results revealed information that made the tragedy even more disturbing. Fernandez had cocaine metabolites and a blood alcohol level of 0.147 in his system at the time of the crash. The crash involved impairment while operating a high-speed vessel at night. These findings raise serious questions about the circumstances that led to the fatal accident. The Marlins and Major League Baseball preferred to focus on his baseball achievements, rather than discuss the troubling details of that night. His death at age 24 left the organization and community devastated emotionally and operationally. The team lost its projected long-term ace, and his sudden loss left a massive hole in their rotation and their future plans. The circumstances surrounding that fatal night show how quickly poor decisions can destroy not just individual lives, but entire organizations that depend on them. But substance abuse in baseball wasn't always hidden from public view. Sometimes players performed their most memorable feats while completely impaired. Dock Ellis. Dock Ellis threw one of the most famous no-hitters in baseball history on June 12, 1970. But what made this game legendary had nothing to do with his pitching mechanics. Ellis was starting for the Pittsburgh Pirates against the San Diego Padres in what appeared to be a routine Friday night game. The Pirates won 2-0, and Ellis was having a decent year with his usual mix of fastballs and sliders. What Ellis revealed years later about that game completely shocked the baseball world and exposed just how normalized drug use had become in the 1970s professional sports. Ellis claimed he had taken LSD around noon that day while he was in Los Angeles, not realizing he was scheduled to pitch that evening. The acid had already taken full effect by the time he discovered he needed to get to the ballpark and take the mound. Ellis didn't reveal this story publicly until 1984, which shows how the culture around drug use in baseball took time to be admitted to and discussed openly. Ellis described the experience as completely surreal and unlike anything a professional athlete should attempt. He said the baseball appeared to change sizes throughout the game, sometimes looking tiny and other times appearing massive. The catcher would disappear from his vision entirely during certain moments, forcing Ellis to essentially guess where to throw the ball. As Ellis later recalled, he was zeroed in on the glove, but I didn't hit the glove too much. Despite these severe hallucinations, he somehow managed to locate the strike zone consistently enough to get batters out. The Padres' lineup included solid major league hitters who should have been able to make contact against an impaired pitcher. Ellis walked 8 batters during the game, which shows his control was clearly affected by the drug. He also hit 1 batter with a pitch. But somehow, through 9 complete innings, not a single San Diego hitter managed to get a base hit off Ellis while he was actively hallucinating. This achievement represents something that should be physically impossible in professional sports. Elite athletic performance requires precise hand-eye coordination, split-second timing, and complete mental focus. LSD affects all of these abilities in ways that should make competitive sports performance completely impossible. Yet Ellis managed to throw 135 pitches and record 27 outs without allowing a hit. The no-hitter became a symbol of how completely substance abuse had been normalized within baseball culture during the 1970s. Players regularly used drugs and alcohol without serious consequences from their teams or the league. Ellis later worked as a substance abuse counselor, and he died in 2008. But not every tragedy in baseball came from players making destructive choices. Sometimes the most promising careers were cut short by forces completely beyond their control. Nick Adenhart. Nick Adenhart pitched the game of his life on April 8, 2009, throwing 6 scoreless innings for the Los Angeles Angels against the Oakland Athletics. The 22-year-old right-hander had finally reached the moment he had dreamed about since childhood. This was only his 4th career major league start, but Adenhart looked like a seasoned veteran on the mound. He struck out 5 batters while allowing just 7 hits, keeping the dangerous Oakland lineup completely off the scoreboard. Adenhart's path to this performance had been anything but easy. Tommy John surgery had sidelined him for most of 2007, forcing him to rebuild his arm strength and relearn his pitching mechanics. The rehabilitation process took nearly 2 years of grueling work in the minor leagues. Most young pitchers never fully recover from elbow reconstruction surgery, but Adenhart had beaten the odds through determination and countless hours of physical therapy. His father, Jim, had made the trip from Maryland to watch his son pitch at Angel Stadium. Jim Adenhart sat in the stands and watched Nick deliver strike after strike, seeing years of hard work finally paying off. The young pitcher's fastball reached the low 90s, and his changeup kept hitters off balance throughout the game. Nick left the game after 6 innings with his team leading 6-0, having given the Angels exactly what they needed from their young starter. After the game, Adenhart decided to celebrate with friends at a local restaurant and bar. He had earned the right to enjoy this moment after overcoming surgery and proving he belonged in the major leagues. Adenhart was riding high on adrenaline from his dominant performance and looking forward to many more starts in an Angels uniform. Hours later, Adenhart sat in a red Mitsubishi Eclipse at the intersection of Catella Avenue and Orangewood Avenue in Fullerton. The light was red, and he was waiting patiently with 2 friends in the car. At 12:19 a.m., a minivan ran the red light at high speed and crashed directly into their vehicle. The driver had a blood alcohol content of 0.19 and was on probation for a prior DUI. The collision killed Adenhart and passenger Courtney Stewart instantly. The 3rd passenger, Henry Pearson, died later at the hospital from his injuries. Andrew Gallo, the drunk driver, was later convicted of 3 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 51 years to life in prison. The Angels gave his family a full playoff share and retired his locker while wearing tributes throughout the season. The pitching staff and clubhouse were left with survivor guilt and the sense that a promising trajectory had been snatched away. His death shows how external negligence can destroy what took years of dedication to build. But sometimes the destruction came from within, creating cycles that even the most talented players couldn't escape. Josh Hamilton. Josh Hamilton was supposed to be baseball's ultimate redemption story, but his career became a repeating pattern that revealed how teams and media handle addiction. The Tampa Bay Devil Rays selected Hamilton as the first overall pick in the 1999 MLB draft, recognizing his incredible natural talent as both a hitter and outfielder. His high school statistics were amazing, and scouts believed he had the potential to become a superstar in the major leagues. Hamilton's raw ability was undeniable when he was clean and focused on baseball. His swing was smooth and powerful, generating tremendous bat speed that could turn any mistake pitch into a home run. His outfield defense was equally impressive, with the speed and arm strength to cover huge amounts of ground. When Hamilton won the American League MVP award in 2010, he hit .359 with 32 home runs and 100 RBIs for the Texas Rangers, proving that his talent was genuinely elite. The problem was that addiction kept derailing whatever momentum Hamilton built during his clean periods. His cocaine and alcohol problems first surfaced early in his professional career, completely sidelining him for nearly 3 full seasons in the early 2000s. He didn't make his MLB debut until 2007 at age 26, losing crucial developmental years that most players use to refine their skills and adjust to professional competition. His comeback with the Rangers seemed like the perfect story for teams and media to celebrate. Hamilton not only returned to baseball but became one of the best players in the game almost immediately. His 2008 home run derby performance at Yankee Stadium was legendary, as he launched 28 home runs in the first round alone. Fans and media loved the narrative of the troubled player who had overcome his demons through faith and determination. But the relapses kept coming in 2009, then again in 2012, and once more in 2015 when he self-reported to avoid suspension. Each time, the cycle repeated itself with teams and media celebrating his returns without addressing the underlying addiction issues. The Angels still signed him to a $125 million contract in 2012 despite his history, showing how organizations prioritize talent over addressing systemic problems. Hamilton's story continued after his playing days ended. In 2019, he was charged with assaulting his teenage daughter and eventually pleaded guilty to unlawful restraint charges. This incident showed that retirement from baseball had not solved his underlying problems. The pattern revealed how baseball's approach to addiction focused on celebrating comebacks rather than providing long-term support systems. But addiction wasn't the only dangerous behavior that teams preferred to ignore when young stars were involved. Yordano Ventura. Yordano Ventura had everything a young baseball player could want by age 25. His fastball reached 100 miles per hour consistently, making him one of the hardest throwers in Major League Baseball. The fiery right-hander from the Dominican Republic had helped the Kansas City Royals win the 2015 World Series with his dominant pitching and competitive fire. Over 4 MLB seasons, Ventura was 38-31 with a 3.89 ERA, and he had just signed a $23 million extension before his death. His blazing fastball and nasty curveball made him nearly unhittable when he commanded his pitches properly. Ventura was known throughout baseball for his intense competitive spirit and willingness to challenge any hitter. He never backed down from confrontations and often stared down batters after striking them out. This aggressive approach made him a fan favorite in Kansas City and earned respect from teammates who appreciated his fearless attitude on the mound. The background research documents patterns of risky driving among some young, newly wealthy players who suddenly have access to millions of dollars. The culture among young MLB players often celebrates expensive cars and extreme speed as symbols of success and status. Social media posts frequently showed players with their luxury vehicles, and reckless driving behavior was rarely criticized by teams or the league. Ventura owned multiple high-end vehicles and was known for driving them at dangerous speeds on roads that were not designed for such reckless behavior. This pattern of dangerous driving was common among young players who had grown up poor and suddenly found themselves with enough money to buy whatever they wanted. On January 22, 2017, Ventura was driving his Jeep Wrangler on a curved road in the Dominican Republic during the off-season. He was traveling at excessive speed when he approached a sharp curve that required much slower driving to navigate safely. Ventura lost control of the vehicle when he failed to slow down enough for the turn. The Jeep flipped violently after leaving the roadway. Ventura was ejected from the vehicle during the crash and died at the scene. His promising career ended in a completely preventable tragedy that shocked the baseball world. Another former MLB player, Andy Marte, died separately that same day, making January 22, 2017, one of the darkest days in recent baseball history. His death exposed how little the sport does to educate players about the dangers of high-speed driving or provide guidance about responsible spending. The Royals honored him with Ace 30 memorial patches in 2017, but his death highlighted the gap between celebrating young talent and protecting it from destructive choices. But not every tragedy came from reckless decisions. Sometimes players became victims of violence that had nothing to do with their own actions. Lyman Bostock. Lyman Bostock was having the best season of his career in 1978, hitting .336 for the California Angels and establishing himself as one of baseball's most promising young stars. The 27-year-old outfielder had signed a massive 5-year contract worth $2.25 million with the Angels during the offseason, making him one of the highest-paid players in baseball. His smooth swing and consistent hitting had made him a fan favorite, and scouts believed he was just entering his prime years as a hitter. Bostock had come from humble beginnings, growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, before starring at California State University Northridge. His professional career started with the Minnesota Twins, where he hit over 303 consecutive seasons. The Angels saw him as a cornerstone player who could anchor their lineup for years to come. His 1978 performance was backing up their investment completely. On September 23, 1978, Bostock was visiting his uncle in Gehrig, Indiana, during a road trip break. He was riding as a passenger in a car driven by his uncle's goddaughter, Barbara Smith, along with her 2 young children in the back seat. The group was simply driving through the neighborhood on what should have been a routine evening visit with family. Leonard Smith had been following his estranged wife Barbara's car because he suspected she was involved with another man. Smith was consumed with jealous rage and had decided to confront whoever he thought was having an affair with his wife. When he spotted the car at a red light and saw a man sitting in the passenger seat next to Barbara, he jumped to the wrong conclusion completely. Smith pulled his car up next to Barbara's vehicle while they waited at the traffic light. Without any warning or attempt to verify who was actually in the car, Smith reached for his shotgun and fired directly through the passenger window. Bostock was struck in the head and died 2 hours later at age 27, becoming the victim of a jealous husband's rage that was directed at the wrong person entirely. The legal aftermath of this senseless murder proved almost as shocking as the crime itself. Leonard Smith was charged with first-degree murder for killing Bostock, but his defense team argued that he was legally insane at the time of the shooting. The jury accepted this argument despite the premeditated nature of Smith's actions. Smith was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sentenced to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. He was released after serving just 7 months in the facility. The verdict provoked public outrage and later reforms to Indiana's insanity defense laws, but those changes came too late to bring back a talented player whose career was ended by completely random violence. Sometimes the violence came from strangers, but other times the danger came from people players were supposed to trust completely. Tyler Skaggs. Tyler Skaggs' death on July 1, 2019, initially appeared to be a tragic accident when the 27-year-old Angels pitcher was found unresponsive in his hotel room in Southlake, Texas. The team was on a road trip to play the Texas Rangers, and Skaggs had been expected to start the next day's game. His teammates were devastated when they discovered that one of their own had died suddenly during what should have been a routine road trip. The initial report suggested that Skaggs had simply passed away in his sleep, possibly from a heart condition or other natural cause. The Angels organization and Major League Baseball treated his death as a terrible but unexplained tragedy. Skaggs had been a solid pitcher for the team, posting a 4.29 ERA over his career and showing promise as a reliable starter in their rotation. The autopsy results changed everything about how people understood Skaggs' death. Medical examiners determined that he had died from opioid and alcohol-induced asphyxiation, meaning dangerous drugs had killed him. The toxicology report showed fentanyl and oxycodone in his system at lethal levels. This wasn't a natural death or a heart condition. Skaggs had been using dangerous substances that stopped his breathing while he slept. The investigation that followed revealed something much more disturbing than a player struggling with addiction on his own. Federal authorities discovered that the drugs in Skaggs' system hadn't come from street dealers or illegal sources. Instead, Eric Kay, the Angels communications director, had been supplying opioids directly to players on the team. An Angels staffer had used his position to supply opioids to players over several seasons. Kay had access to players and their trust, which he exploited to provide dangerous opioid medications that should only be available through legitimate medical prescriptions. Kay wasn't just enabling addiction among players, he was actively supplying the substances that were destroying their lives. Multiple Angels players testified during Kay's trial about receiving drugs from him over several seasons. These testimonies exposed a systemic problem within the organization where a team official was distributing controlled substances to athletes who trusted him. The scope of Kay's drug dealing showed this wasn't an isolated incident, but a pattern of behavior that had put many players at risk. The federal court system treated Kay's crimes with appropriate seriousness. He was convicted of drug distribution resulting in death and conspiracy charges. Kay received a 22-year prison sentence for his role in Skaggs' death and his years of supplying opioids to players. The team honored Skaggs on July 12, 2019, when Taylor Cole and Felix Pena threw a combined no-hitter while teammates wore his number 45. But Skaggs' death revealed how team officials can exploit their positions to enable deadly addictions among the athletes they're supposed to protect. Not every tragedy in baseball came from corruption or negligence. Sometimes the most devastating losses happened when players tried to do something genuinely heroic. Roberto Clemente. Roberto Clemente had already achieved everything possible in professional baseball by the end of 1972. The Pittsburgh Pirates right fielder had collected his 3,000th career hit during the final game of the regular season, finishing with a .317 career average. His 12 straight Gold Glove awards proved he was the best defensive outfielder of his generation. 4 National League batting titles showed his incredible hitting ability. 2 World Series championships with Pittsburgh had given him team success to match his individual accomplishments, including World Series MVP honors in 1971. On New Year's Eve 1972, Clemente was focused on something much more important than any baseball statistic he had ever compiled. A massive 6.3 magnitude earthquake had devastated Nicaragua on December 23rd, killing approximately 5,000 people and leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. The disaster had destroyed entire cities and created a humanitarian crisis that required immediate international assistance to prevent even more deaths from starvation and disease. Clemente immediately began organizing relief efforts from his home in Puerto Rico. He used his fame and connections to collect supplies, raise money, and coordinate shipments to the earthquake victims. Clemente personally supervised the loading of food, medicine, and clothing onto cargo planes headed for Nicaragua. His commitment to helping the earthquake victims went far beyond writing a check or making a public statement. Previous relief shipments had been stolen by corrupt officials or military personnel before reaching the people who desperately needed them. Clemente discovered that much of the aid being sent to Nicaragua was disappearing into the hands of people who planned to sell it for profit. This corruption meant that earthquake victims were dying while relief supplies sat in warehouses or got sold on the black market. Clemente decided he needed to accompany the final shipment personally to ensure the supplies reached their intended recipients. He believed his celebrity status would prevent officials from stealing the aid if he was present during the delivery. The DC-7 aircraft chosen for this flight was overloaded by about 4,193 pounds beyond its safe carrying capacity. The aircraft also had documented maintenance issues that should have prevented it from being cleared for flight. Multiple people warned Clemente about the dangerous condition of the aircraft before takeoff. Aviation experts told him the plane was not safe for flight, especially with such a heavy cargo load. Despite these warnings, Clemente insisted on making the humanitarian flight because he knew people were dying while waiting for help. The overloaded DC-7 crashed into the Atlantic Ocean shortly after takeoff from San Juan Airport. All 5 people aboard were killed, including Clemente. Major League Baseball renamed its humanitarian award in his honor, and he became the first Caribbean player elected to the Hall of Fame in 1973. But not every player who struggled with personal demons died while trying to help others. Steve Howe. Steve Howe was one of the most talented left-handed pitchers of his generation, but addiction turned his career into a revolving door of suspensions and failed comebacks. The Los Angeles Dodgers discovered Howe in the minor leagues and quickly realized they had found something special. His slider was devastating against both left-handed and right-handed hitters. His fastball had enough velocity to set up his breaking ball perfectly. After winning National League Rookie of the Year in 1980 with a 2.66 ERA and 17 saves, Howe helped the Dodgers win the 1981 World Series with dominant relief pitching throughout the playoffs. He was an All-Star in 1982, and his performance in clutch situations made him one of the most valuable players on the team. Howe seemed destined for a long career as one of baseball's elite closers. Teams were already comparing him to the best relief pitchers in the game. The problem was that Howe's incredible talent kept earning him second chances from teams even as cocaine and alcohol addiction took control of his life. Each comeback was followed by another devastating relapse that wiped out whatever progress he had made during his clean periods. His behavior became increasingly unpredictable as substance abuse dominated his decision-making. Howe was suspended 7 separate times for substance abuse violations throughout his career. He missed the entire 1984 season due to suspension, costing him a full year of earnings and development. The suspensions kept getting longer as baseball officials tried to force him into sobriety through punishment rather than treatment. Major League Baseball issued a controversial lifetime ban against Howe in 1992 after his 7th violation. The ban was later overturned through legal challenges, allowing him to return in 1993. After a period of sobriety, Howe posted a solid 1.80 ERA in 1994, proving his arm was still effective when he stayed clean. This success convinced teams to keep giving him chances despite his repeated failures. By 1996, his career was effectively finished, but his struggles with addiction continued long after baseball. The pattern repeated itself throughout his career: repeated second chances, escalating punishments, and eventual relapse. The revolving door approach never addressed the underlying addiction that was destroying his life. Howe's story had one final tragic chapter that occurred a full decade after his playing days ended. On April 28, 2006, he died in a single-car accident in Coachella, California, while driving under the influence of methamphetamine. His pickup truck flipped multiple times after leaving the roadway at high speed. His death represented the final tragic outcome of a long, unresolved addiction problem, and the league's cyclical responses that never provided real solutions. The pattern in Howe's case wasn't unique to his situation alone. These 11 stories reveal a disturbing pattern about how Major League Baseball operates as a business first and a sport second. The common thread isn't just tragedy, it's how systematically these stories have been buried, downplayed, or sanitized by the baseball establishment. From medical negligence to addiction, enabling to institutional cover-ups, baseball's wholesome image masks decades of putting profits over player welfare. The league protects its brand by controlling narratives and limiting uncomfortable discussions about player deaths and destroyed careers. Media outlets cooperate by focusing on feel-good stories rather than investigating systematic failures. Fans deserve to know the real cost of America's pastime. Like and subscribe for 100 years of luck.